Superman is finally losing control, and I'm so glad this is happening. It makes me sound like a villain. So this basically starts with this kind of recollection, right? It says, you must have felt it. Your anger is growing, infecting you. Farman Graf, synthetic red kryptonite, it's still in your system, Superman, fueled by your negative emotions, pushing you. We've never seen anything like it. Your invulnerability was keeping it in check. But when Amanda Waller stole your powers, it kicked into overdrive. Even with your powers back, until we find a way to purge the red kryptonite from your system, we need to be extra careful that you don't lose control. Because he busts into the prison cell of Lex Luthor, more pissed off than he's ever been, like, what have you done? Okay, so here's a bit of an understanding of what's going on for all you new folks out there. So back in Superman issues 8 and 9 from Joshua Williamson, Superman was basically taken by something called the Lex Luthor Revenge Squad. It's kind of like a mini version of Batman's Victim Syndicate, for those of you guys who remember that Detective Comics story. The long and short of it is that a couple of people named Farman Graf had created red kryptonite and then infused it to Superman. And ever since Superman issue number 139, back in 1960, the effects of red kryptonite were established as being random. For example, in that story, Superman became a mermaid. Not even lying, right? But the effects were random, and there was no real way to know exactly how it was going to affect him. What you're getting here is this effect where it's pushing Superman's anger to higher and higher limits, and for that instance where it's being talked about of Amanda Waller taking Superman's powers, that was all during absolute power. Right, that was that huge crossover storyline where Amanda Waller wanted to destroy superheroes. We covered it, and it was pretty cool. But Superman, of course, having his abilities back and all that kind of stuff, is now incredibly powerful, but also always on the edge and always being pushed to greater and greater levels of rage. And so what this does is it switches over to Lex Luthor. Now, a lot of this is just aftermath and consequence, so it's not supremely important to the narrative overall, but it is important with regards to how the story ends. Because those of you guys who don't recall, Lex Luthor had basically lost his memories at the end of Absolute Power. And when that happened, it was kind of turning over a new leaf. It was him becoming a good guy. So it was very reminiscent of like Superman in Action Rebirth, where he was essentially a teammate with Superman himself. And I think we were all waiting for him to bring back the old Superman armor. But the fact is that what you end up getting here is this conversation with Lena Luthor. And this whole thing pisses her off to no end, because when Lex became a good guy, she kind of felt like he was turning over a new leaf permanently, and that he was going to stay a good guy, kind of become the father she always hoped for. Now, she does make reference to things like he gave her away to Brainiac 13 when she was a baby, that kind of thing. That was a story from the year 2000 called Superman Y2K. And what she's talking about in specific actually happened in Superman 763, but it was basically Lex Luthor, quote-unquote, trading Lena for advanced technology. There was a little more to it than that, but it also kind of went directly into Our Worlds at War, so Imperiex and all that kind of stuff. The important thing is that this kind of feeds into the idea that the relationship between the two of them had always been strained. So seeing her father go from being a good guy back to being a bad guy was incredibly problematic for her. But this is also incredibly important because it focuses on the idea of what Mercy had done, Mercy being the personal assistant of Lex Luthor. And what had taken place was that in the events leading up to this, Mercy had unleashed XL, right? Basically this kind of clone that Lex Luthor had made with all the abilities of Superman that would have basically been a villain tasked with destroying Superman. Of course, it was created back when Lex was a bad guy, but this was just kind of like a gigantic ruse from Mercy that ultimately saw Lex's memories restored to the person that he was before. And that was her grand scheme, to bring back the original Lex Luthor as opposed to the one who was trying to be a good guy. It was a fantastic character narrative for him. But then you switch over to Lois, again, kind of continuing this aftermath here, where Lois has now lost her Superwoman powers. That was also a byproduct of Absolute Power, that when powers are basically restored to the various superheroes across the world, powers got mixed up. So some people swapped powers, other people lost their powers entirely. In the case of Lois, it was just a small little moment for Joshua Williamson to bring her back as Superwoman, right, from just the old school stories that have happened various times over the years in DC Comics. What's really interesting about this is that once you realize that her powers are basically permanently gone, right, so it's not as though she's been depowered and they can just find a way to bring her back, Lois does find some measure of comfort in saying that her life was great before all of this and it'll continue to be great, that she loves where she is. The reality is that she's lying here, because in this conversation that Superman has with Lex Luthor, kind of jumping back to this moment here, there's a huge revelation that's made with regards to Lois, because Superman says, this will be short, right? Do you have any other tricks up your sleeve that I should know about? Any other dangerous clones of yourself with all of my powers? And the response of Lex, yes, right? I built XL to be used as a weapon, but I knew it was dangerous and never used it. That should count for something. And the response to Superman, you killed your clone. You killed that guy. Now, this created a kind of moral quandary, right? If the clone had been created by Lex Luthor, did Lex Luthor have the right to kill it? You guys were kind of debating that all throughout the comments section of that video. Was Lex Luthor wrong for doing that, right? That kind of thing. In the eyes of Superman, he was. Even if it was a clone, and even if he was crazy, and even if he was systematically breaking down on the genetic level, and it was only a matter of time before he was going to die anyway, it was not Lex's place to do that, which makes Lex a murderer. Now, is it kind of being done in a way to fast-track Lex back to being the quote-unquote classic villain? 100%. Right, but the fact is that Lex argues here. He says, I did that to save Metropolis. Lois understood. That's why she sacrificed herself. How is Lois doing, by the way, post-Superwoman? And initially, Superman kind of brushes off that bit of a conversation, and Lex just says, listen to me, right? I want us to work together again to be a team. And he's like, I can prove that you need me. I can give Lois her powers back. And he tells Superman, I know how to do it. It would not be that hard. And initially, Superman doesn't trust him, but he says, think of Lois, what your wife must be feeling right now. On the surface, she tells you she's fine, but everybody does that. What is she actually feeling down on the inside? To be so close to greatness, all that power, she could fly by your side, know what it felt like to be you. But it wasn't just about the power for her, was it? She knew she could actually make a difference in the world instead of just reporting on it. To have that life yanked away, what does that do to a person? What does it do to a marriage? And Lex is right. He is right in this way. He's not wrong. Lois just kind of feels like there's something missing. She misses having powers. For the first time in her life, she was equal to Superman and could affect change in the world. And now it's all gone. And he asks the question, what if she begins to resent you? And that's where Superman starts losing control again. And in that moment, once he starts to recognize this, he tells Lex, something's wrong. Right? Something triggered the red kryptonite, but this time it's different. What did you do to me? And Superman just keeps getting angrier and angrier and angrier, and it keeps ramping up, ramping up, and ramping up, and he just tells Lex Luthor, run. Because if you don't run, I will kill you. He's literally losing control of himself, right? At that moment, all these prison guards show up, and Superman just starts smacking them around mercilessly, beating them within an inch of their life. Incredibly uncharacteristic actions of Superman, unless you're talking about New 52. But for this Superman, it's incredibly uncharacteristic. He doesn't do this. He does not do this kind of thing. And that's how you know that his anger truly is getting the better of him. And so following that, Lex goes and visits Farm and Graft. And he's like, look, here's the thing. I understand you guys are the ones that screwed up Superman. You poisoned him with synthetic red kryptonite. You're the reason he is the way he is right now. And their whole motivation for even doing that in the first place was to get revenge on Lex Luthor by destroying the thing that matters to him the most, Metropolis. And so they were like, Superman, either you join us in destroying Lex Luthor, or we will obliterate everything that you love and care about. Of course, Superman didn't and was ultimately poisoned with red kryptonite, basically to kind of solidify this idea that he would do that whether he wanted to or not. But switching back to him, right after Lex makes this kind of deal with them, that Superman kind of regains momentary control of himself. And in that moment, you suddenly have Marilyn Moonlight who shows up on the scene. Now, Marilyn Moonlight is cool. I don't really know if there's much of a future for her character in DC Comics, but the quick and dirty of this is that her story is largely told in Superman issues 2 and 10. The reason why she really matters within the confines of this story is because in Superman issues 2 and 10, it was established she had the ability to recharge Superman, right? To give him his powers back whenever those powers were lost. She does have her own story and her own narrative. She had basically died at one point. She was brought back to become the quote-unquote spirit of Metropolis to protect the city whenever there was anything going on. But again, I put spirit of Metropolis in quotes because that's her name. That's what she's actually called. But the fact is, right, we don't really know what future she's going to have, and you'll see what I'm talking about as we get further into it. But when Superman's facing down Marilyn Moonlight, he literally tells her, do not fight me. And initially she takes it as a kind of threat, like, oh, okay, well, you don't want me to fight you because you're so dangerous, that kind of thing. And he's like, no, you need to understand. Drop your guns and just listen. The red kryptonite in my system, I can feel myself regaining some measure of control. Instead of shooting me, follow me, right? Once he gets to the cells where Farm and Graft are being held, they're gone. And he's like, and so is Luthor. And that pisses him off even more, right? Because he realizes this whole thing had to have been some kind of a concoction, some kind of a plan, right? And so he says, Marilyn, listen to me. I think Luthor is manipulating you. It cannot be a coincidence you were drawn to Strikers here and now. I suspect he controls where you go. I cannot prove it, but you have to trust me. If you really want to stop me, we need to find Lex Luthor. And so that's where Lex shows back up to visit Mercy. Now, here's the cool thing about this, right? This is one of the things I love about it. The purple and green. We're one story arc away from the return of the battle suit, which is one of the coolest parts of Lex Luthor's history. Right? But what he says is like, I had to see you. And initially, it's not to kill her. Right? He says, I know why you did what you did, that you just wanted things back to the way they were, but that's never going to happen. I have all of my memories, the memories I had before I lost them, and the memories that I've made since that time. But I came to give you a choice. You can have Supercorp, it's yours entirely, or you can come with me. Now, Supercorp was quite literally LexCorp being taken over by Superman, or given to Superman rather, and Superman using all the resources of LexCorp to kind of fund this almost Batman Incorporated type thing, right? Superman forces all across the world by super people, so King Kong, the Superman of China, so on and so forth. It was cool, right? King Kong had been around long before Supercorp, but it was cool. It was a really awesome idea. And so jumping back to Superman, when he's heading back, Marilyn tells him, if you lose control again, I will shoot you. And the response of Superman, I'm doing my best to keep my rage in check and save it for Luthor. If Farm and Graft did this, I need to know why Luthor would free them in the first place. And so Marilyn asks the question, right? I've been watching over Metropolis for years, long before any of this has gone on. Why would Lex Luthor create a curse that binds me to the city? How would he do that? And the response of Superman, I don't think it was a curse, but science that Luthor created. We'll ask him in person once we find him. But first, I hear Farm and Graft. So initially, Superman shows up in the city of Metropolis, and Farm and Graft are just kind of tearing things up for the most part, right? Ripping the whole place apart, only to find out that they had been betrayed. That when Luthor made a promise to them that it would also involve them fighting to the death, because as you would expect, the Luthor Revenge Squad wants to kill Lex Luthor. And so what's cool about this is that Superman, in observing all of this, says that giant robot that they're in, it's from the same nanotech that was used to create the S on top of Supercorp. And so the question she has is like, how in the world do we stop this thing? And he says, we fight our way inside that thing and find out. And in that moment, Superman's contacted by Lex Luthor, and he says, I know you can hear me. And he says, Farm and Graft and I made a deal. If they agreed to cure you, I would free them. Of course, they lied. They had no cure, but I did. I always did. And I sent it to you. You've proven to me that you're smarter than you act, Superman, so let's not pretend that you have not figured it out. And the response of Superman, you planned this. All of this was a ruse for your escape. And the response of Lex, correct. I triggered your Red K. I sent Marilyn after you. I freed Farm and Graft. And it was all just a distraction. And the question of Superman, where in the world are you going? And the response of Lex, if you want to beat this nanobot armor, you will need to use something made from the same material. And he says, when I started this plan, it was to get you to trust me. That was my original plan. It really, really was. But as we worked together, I saw the lie I had carefully crafted become truth. We were a good team. Metropolis and the world were better with us working side by side. But I cannot escape who I was. I need to figure out who I am now. And that means leaving Metropolis. But before I left, I had to be sure to say goodbye. And so that statement of using something of the same material, it's the sign on LexCorp. So quite literally, Superman has to tear down Supercorp in order to defeat Farm and Graft. Symbolically, it is the end of an era. Because Superman in turn tells Marilyn, shoot me now, in this moment, otherwise it's all over. She fires her shot with Moonlight, and not only does it cure Superman of his red kryptonite radiation, it also defeats Farm and Graft. And so at that point, Marilyn is still there in the sun, which she's not supposed to be, right? She can only operate by night. So basically she's freed of whatever this curse was that bound her there. Likely it'll probably go into her own story. I have no idea if that's going to be the case or not. She'll just disappear forever. But Superman shows up to Mercy and is like, where is Lex Luthor? And she's like, I thought Lex cured you of your rage from Red K. And he's like, no, this is not red kryptonite. This is me. I'm pissed. I am incensed. Where is Lex Luthor? And her response, I don't know, right? He asked me to go with him, but where he goes now, I cannot follow. I have no idea where Lex Luthor is. And initially Superman's like, if you're lying, there's going to be hell to pay. And her response, your super hearing tells you that I'm not lying, right? The reality is that I'm not. Just go home. Just know this. You might be upset with me today, but you need me. And because of what Mr. Luthor taught me, I will always be here to help you whenever you need it. And so in the aftermath of this, before we get to this really cool moment, in the aftermath of this, Superman goes to visit Lois, but he goes to visit her as Clark Kent. And it's an incredibly bonding moment between the two, because what ends up happening is Superman takes her out on a kind of date night and starts flying her around. But there's a huge difference between doing it as Superman and doing it as Clark Kent. If he does it as Superman, whether he intends to or not, it almost kind of communicates this idea that I am what you used to be, right? It's a reminder of the life that she lost. Whereas if he does it as Clark Kent, it's a reminder of the life she has, that it keeps her on an even keel with him. It makes her feel like they're still together as an actual couple, that there is no gap, no chasm between Superman, the Man of Steel, the Man of Tomorrow, and Lois Lane, who just reports on the news, right? That doesn't exist anymore. And it's a really, really awesome gesture. But to the end of this, right, to the end of this thing, this is one of the coolest things. What you do is you pick up in the future. Now keep in mind, the undercurrent story arc that was going on throughout all of this was Time Trapper, right? As a kind of reminder here, Time Trapper is Doomsday. That because Doomsday can be killed, but when he comes back, he's immune to whatever killed him. As enough time passed, he basically became immortal and survived all the way into the end of time in this kind of eternal battle with Superman, right? Who still exists in this far-flung future. But that what had happened here is that Time Trapper had basically been attacked by what appeared to be just a bunch of evil superheroes. But one of the things that we learned very, very quickly, they're from the absolute universe. And where initially it was a little uncertain that you could kind of go either way, we actually figured that out incredibly quickly. Because what ends up happening is they say, we need you to meet our other captive. Booster Gold is no joke. He's the most important person in time and space. Our boy passed through the rift. It filled him with pure Omega energy, the stuff of dark creation, the same energy our master used to create our world. He's the key to everything. And initially the response of Time Trapper, right, of Doomsday is like, your master will not be happy you just revealed that. And the response is, we're not afraid of you, Time Trapper. My magnetic powers use your unbreakable chains against you. There's no way that you can escape. But this is when you start to realize these guys don't really know what they're messing with, because the response of Doomsday is, you may know me as Time Trapper, but you don't truly know me if you do not know the fact that I am still Doomsday, and nothing controls me, nothing can hold me, and nothing can stop me. And he says, you might have stolen the future, but just as I am immortal, so is this fight. And he says, I have to find the World Forger. And then he jumps into the time stream. And so at that point, the Legion is just kind of like, I mean, do we go after him? And they're like, no. Right? Like, let him run. We know where he'll end up eventually. And they're like, at this point right now, our main focus needs to be finding Superman. So again, Darkseid's Legion will appear, because I told you guys, DC is building up to a crossover between the main DC universe and the absolute universe, which is going to be amazing. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.